My name is Anna Whitaker. I'm 36 years old. And last week, I sat through an entire family dinner where my own father toasted to the legacy of our name without so much as acknowledging mine. No eye contact, no seat reserved, no trace I'd ever belonged there. The last time I'd stood in that dining room, I was 22 and wearing army fatigues, a duffel on my shoulder, and boots still coated with training dust. My father didn't say goodbye. He just handed me a folded napkin with a grocery list on it and muttered, "The Army won't make you a leader, Anna. Just a forgotten file." He was wrong about the leadership part, but the forgotten part, well, he made sure of that. That night, the dinner, it was Ethan's promotion celebration. My younger brother, Ethan Whitaker, tailored navy suit, gold Rolex catching the chandelier light like he was blessed. He looked up from his wine glass as I stepped into the room and smirked. Didn't think failures liked cake. My boots clicked once against the hardwood before I caught myself. I smiled. No teeth. Cake's free, right? No one laughed. No one even looked my way. There wasn't a place card with my name. Not even a goddamn napkin. The only seat left was next to the kitchen door, where the scent of garlic butter clashed with the bleach on the floor. I took it without comment. Across the table, my father, Frank Whitaker, titan of finance and patriarch of appearances, stood with a flourish. He raised his glass. "To family," he said, "to resilience, to those who stayed when things got hard, and rose to the challenge." His hand landed heavy on Ethan's shoulder. "To Ethan, the man this family can count on, the one who carries the name forward." Applause, crystalline and hollow. My stepmother dabbed her eyes like she was watching a Hallmark movie. Someone clinked silverware against a champagne flute. I didn't lift my glass. Instead, I unfolded the napkin in my lap, tore the edge, folded it again, and again, until it frayed between my fingers. I'd survived evacuations under gunfire, watched comrades bleed out in desert heat, held families while they screamed into satellite phones. But nothing made me feel more erased than that one speech, that one toast, in that room of polished liars. A part of me wanted to scream. Another part, it just filed the moment away. Like the Army taught me, observe, record, wait. Then, like clockwork, Frank leaned toward me as dessert arrived, an elaborate almond tart, sugar spun into the shape of a rose. "You were a mistake," he said softly. "We tried to forget. Don't make us remember you again." I didn't flinch, just stared at him until he blinked. There was a time when those words would have shattered me. Now, they just confirmed what I already knew. I no longer had a place here. But then my phone vibrated, unknown. "Caller," I answered. A calm voice controlled. Confidence spoke through static. "Commander Whitaker, we've reviewed the file. You are not forgotten. We need to meet." My hand tightened around the phone. The tart on my plate remained untouched. No one at the table noticed. The next morning, I walked up the stone steps of a library I had personally funded over a decade ago. It used to be called the Windham Hill Community Learning Center, a place meant to honor education for all, especially the children of veterans. Now it bore a brand new plaque, gleaming brass letters, the Whitaker Family Community Library. I stared at it like it had slapped me. I'd donated under anonymity back then, thinking it was noble, thinking legacy didn't need a name. I was wrong, because someone else had claimed it. Inside, the library looked like it had been scrubbed with a corporate toothbrush, sanitized, whitewashed, rebranded. More touchscreen kiosks than bookshelves. Too clean, too quiet. A young woman, maybe early 20s, greeted me near the reference desk. Ponytail, nervous smile. Her name tag said Linda. "Can I help you just visiting?" I replied, then added, "I used to fund this place." Her eyes widened.
Oh, are you with Mr. Ethan's side or Mr. Frank's?
I froze. What do you mean? Sighed. She flushed, fumbled.
I just meant the family. Never mind.
She pivoted quickly. We have a new archive section now for local military service records. It's amazing. Want me to show you? I nodded, not because I expected anything, but because my gut was already twisting. She led me past the children's section, down a narrow hallway lined with framed photos. Most were black and white. Uniforms, flags, proud chins. Then I saw it. Ethan, wearing a replica army dress uniform, one hand on a child's shoulder, the other holding a folded flag. That one's super popular, Linda said brightly. Mr. Ethan didn't serve, but he says he carries the legacy. My stomach dropped. My jaw didn't move. I had to grip the edge of the terminal just to steady myself. Sure, I said quietly. Beautiful. Inside the archive room, Linda tapped on the screen, pulled up the interface. We've digitized all the local service files, courtesy of Whitaker Group PR. Actually, look, your name's even here. She clicked. My profile popped up. Anna Whitaker, Army Reserve, Division Logistics, rank 2nd Lieutenant, status administrative leave, discharged, no citations, no commendations, no deployments. None of it was true. Gone was Fallujah. Gone was Travis. Gone were the 3 commendations I'd earned in my 2nd year for field evac under fire. I leaned forward, accessed the metadata. The system wasn't locked. Uploaded 7 months ago. Source Whitaker Group Public Affairs. They rewrote me. Is something wrong? Linda asked. I stood slowly. My spine felt like ice. No, I said. Just dusty history. Nothing a little truth can't clean. Then I saw it by the exit. A glossy flyer pinned to the bulletin board. Honor Forward. A new veteran initiative. Serving those who served. Because legacy never dies. Funded by the Whitaker Group. And at the bottom, donor names. All Whitakers. All male. My name was gone. My mother's, too. Only then did I realize. They hadn't just erased me from dinner. They'd erased me from the war. From memory. From legacy. And if I wanted it back, I'd have to fight like hell. But I wouldn't do it alone. Next, the woman who saved everything I thought I'd lost inside a worn-out thumb drive. The room was cold. Not the kind of cold that hits your skin deeper. Like walking into a place where truth used to live, but got evicted quietly. Overnight. I stared at the screen one more time. Anna Whitaker, Army Reserve. Administrative leave. No deployments, no commendations. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my story, then buried it beneath 6 feet of polished lies. And the worst part, no one noticed. Not Linda, the chipper intern who thought fake photos in a library counted as legacy. Not the people taking selfies in front of Ethan's military portrait, a man who'd never even worn boots that got dirty. I took a step back from the screen. My heart was pounding in my ears, but my face didn't move. That's the thing about trauma, you get good at hiding it, especially when you've had to for over a decade. I needed air. I needed silence. Instead, I walked straight into a wall of noise. Ethan's voice, crisp and too confident, echoing from a recorded message on loop in the lobby. We at the Whitaker Group believe in preserving the legacy of those who served, even if their stories were never told properly. I laughed out loud, a sharp, bitter sound that made a woman near the donation box look over. She smiled awkwardly. I didn't return it. I left, but as the doors slid shut behind me, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, same one as the night before. I answered. A woman's voice this time, steady, no hello, no time wasted. The file you saw was fabricated. We kept the original. Meet me, 2 p.m. today. No trail, no questions. Click, line went dead. For a second, I just stood there, fingers frozen around the phone, then muscle memory took over. At 1:58 p.m., I sat inside a tiny roadside diner outside Arlington. Vinyl booths, chipped coffee mugs, and a jukebox that hadn't worked since Obama's first term. The kind of place that didn't ask questions. The bell above the door jingled at exactly 200. She walked in like she didn't want to be seen, but knew someone always would. Grace Parker. I hadn't seen her in nearly 12 years. Last time. We were both elbow deep in a convoy reroute outside Al-Assad. She had this scar above her left eyebrow, shaped like a hook, from where a clipboard flew at her during a blast. It was still there. She slid into the booth across from me, pulled a flash drive from her coat pocket, and placed it between us. No smile, no small talk. We archived everything. The real files. Yours, Travis's, even the citations they buried. I didn't touch it yet. Why now, I asked. Because they're not just erasing you, she said. They're rewriting everything. Whitaker Group bought out 3 vet foundations in the last year. They're running PR campaigns with fake heroes and stolen names. Your name is just one of dozens. She finally looked me in the eye. Travis didn't die in a misfire. He died saving a civilian convoy. And you coordinated that evac. It's all in there. I picked up the drive. It felt heavy, not in weight, in consequence. They altered the report's number, she said. They replaced the originals, deleted every trace from the Department of Defense records, then published their own version through private archives. Private truth, sold like a product, branded and packaged. Welcome to America. I stared out the window, watching a mother lift a toddler into an SUV. The kid wore a little camo jacket. A sticker on the bumper read, "Support our troops." I wondered which version of troops they meant. So how do we undo it, I asked. We don't... Excuse me? She leaned in. You don't fight lies with press releases. Anna, you exposed the whole damn factory, every step, every name, every fake hero they built. I let that sink in. That's what this drive is, phase 1. She slid over a second item, a military dog tag, old and battered. My breath caught. Is this... Travis gave it to me to hold. Said, if anything happened, make sure you got it. I reached out, slow, fingers shaking. When the metal touched my palm, the air felt thinner. I was going to burn it, Grace admitted quietly. After the second time, they ignored my emails. After they shut down the inquiry and labeled it an internal clerical error. Why didn't you? Because you showed up again, at the library, on security footage. I blinked. You've been watching me? No. I've been hoping you'd come back. There's a difference. She stood up, slung her coat over her shoulder. You'll need to move fast. Once they realize this still exists, they'll come after it and maybe you. I slipped the drive and dog tag into my jacket. My voice was low. Let them try. She gave me a look equal parts pity and pride, then walked out. That night, I opened the files. Each page felt like a landmine. There were commendations with my name signed, dated, witnessed, field reports describing our evac in Fallujah, photos, deployment logs, medical records, emails between field officers. Real history, the kind they tried to bleach out of existence. And then buried deep in a subfolder was a scan of a budget ledger. Line 47, contractor payout $1.8 million. Recipient E. Whitaker. Purpose Veteran Media Campaign Consulting. Ethan was paid to be the face of something he never lived, to stand in front of flags and cry on cue, to shake hands with wounded soldiers and say thank you like it meant something. He didn't just steal my legacy, he got rich doing it. That was the moment it all snapped into focus. They thought they'd buried me under bureaucracy, replaced me with a cleaner, more photogenic version of a hero, but they forgot one thing. I've been trained to survive worse than silence. And now I had everything I needed to make noise. Loud, relentless, and public. Next, I walk into a PR gala, wearing the truth. I stood in front of the mirror, hands trembling slightly as I pinned the old army badge to the inside of my jacket, not on the lapel where it would be seen. Inside, where it pressed against my heart. The tag from Travis lay in my left pocket. I hadn't taken it off since Grace handed it to me. It clinked faintly against the flash drive when I moved. 2 ghosts in my pocket, dragging me forward. I looked up. My reflection didn't look like vengeance. It looked like clarity. The Whitaker Group Gala was hosted at the Conrad Hotel, 5-star. Valet only. Crystal chandelier everywhere kind of evening. Outside, veterans in blazers with pins lined up beside tech founders, media executives, and old money families with names like Granite and legacy like Poison. I walked in with no +1, no PR handler, no invite, just confidence that came from knowing something they didn't. The moment I stepped through the lobby, my father's voice boomed through hidden speakers. Tonight is about honoring those who gave everything so we could build something greater. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Frank Whitaker didn't build anything. He bought people who did. The ballroom doors opened to red carpet and camera flashes. At the far end, standing beneath an arch of American flags, was Ethan smiling like he'd just solved world peace with a firm handshake. His suit was perfect, custom-tailored, charcoal with a subtle pattern that screamed expensive without being tacky. But what drew my eye was the pin on his lapel combat service identification badge. I froze. That's not something you buy at a gift shop. It's not handed out at family reunions. That pin means you were there. He wasn't. I felt my nails bite into my palm. My skin burned hot. Before I could step closer, a familiar voice pulled me back. "They let you in." I turned. Linda, from the library, this time in a black cocktail dress, clipboard clutched to her side like armor. "I volunteer at these," she explained, clearly flustered. "I didn't know you were well." "Real," I offered. She flushed. "I just meant I didn't expect to see you again." I smiled slightly, not kindly. "You said Ethan didn't serve. You remember that?" She nodded. And yet, I gestured toward the stage. Here he is, wearing a badge he never earned, accepting awards from institutions that used to serve truth. She glanced down, avoided my eyes.
It's complicated. The Whitakers fund everything now. They save jobs. They
rewrite stories. I cut in, and you helped them do it." Linda looked hurt, but she didn't deny it. The MC's voice boomed over the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise as we welcome our keynote speaker tonight, Mr. Ethan Whitaker." The room erupted in applause. People stood like they were worshiping. And Ethan. He stepped up to the podium like a prince returning to his kingdom. "My name is Ethan Whitaker," he began. "And though I never wore the uniform, I carry with me the weight of those who did. My sister served briefly. She struggled, left quietly. Her path wasn't built for legacy, but I honor her by building something she couldn't." I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft with applause. I scanned the crowd, faces blurred together in polite nods and wine glasses. And somewhere beyond them, I saw my stepmother, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. They believed him. He'd taken the years I bled, the names I buried, the dust I carried in my lungs and turned them into a brand. I took a slow breath, pulled the flash drive from my coat, then the tag. Both in my hand now. I didn't walk toward the stage. Not yet. Instead, I moved to the back, toward the media station rows of laptops and streaming equipment manned by bored interns and tech reps. I didn't ask for permission. I plugged the drive into the master laptop running the live stream feed. One file, one folder, one click, Operations Smokescreen. Inside deployment records, emails, whistleblower statements, DoD contracts, and the photo Travis, standing beside me in dusty gear, holding a radio as we rerouted a convoy under fire. I uploaded everything to their cloud stream, unedited, unsigned, undeniable. Back at the stage, Ethan was wrapping up. And now, as we unveil the Whitaker Foundation for Military Legacy, the giant screen behind him flickered. His face froze, mid-smile, then vanished, replaced by my deployment photo. Me, in uniform, in sand, blood on my sleeves, Travis beside me, alive. Then an official DoD file with my commendations. Then the doctored version, side by side, line by line. And finally line 47 from the Foundation's own ledger, $1.8 million paid to Ethan Whitaker. Purpose Veteran Visibility Campaign. Gasps rippled through the crowd like thunder. One woman covered her mouth. Another whispered, "Is this real?" And Ethan. His smile collapsed. He looked around for help, but his father was frozen in his seat. And Linda. She turned, and for the first time, she really looked at me. I nodded. Security moved toward the tech booth, but I was already gone. Back through the hall, down the elevator, into the night. As I stepped onto the street, I felt the dog tag clink softly in my pocket. I touched it once, like a promise. But it wasn't over. The leak had gone live, but exposure is only the first shot. Next, I go to the board itself and confront the people who sold my silence. 2 days after the gala, I received a certified letter, cream-colored envelope, gold seal, thick stock paper, the kind that smells like old money and polite threats. It was from the Whitaker Group Board of Trustees. The language was sanitized. A closed-door session to clarify recent misinformation and discuss reputational remedies. Translation, damage control. They didn't know what I had. Worse, they didn't know who I'd already sent it to. I arrived at the Whitaker Group headquarters in D.C., wearing the same jacket I wore at the gala. Still had the dog tag in my pocket. Still felt it warm against my thigh when I walked. The security guard at the front desk blinked at my name on the list, but waved me through. Elevators here didn't hum, they whispered. Polished stainless steel. So clean, I could see my past glaring back at me with every reflection. The 39th floor was carpeted in power. Every detail was measured. Every painting curated. And waiting behind that oak double door, the men and women who built this empire on fiction. There were 12 of them, seated around a long, glossy table shaped like a bullet. Frank Whitaker at the head, in a navy suit and the same bored expression he wore at my high school graduation. Next to him sat Ethan, shoulders hunched, suit impeccable, but his eyes were twitching at the corners. And on the other end of the table, lawyers. Polite, predatory. I didn't sit. "Anna," Frank said, gesturing toward a chair like this was Thanksgiving. "Let's begin." "No," I placed my hands on the table. "I'll speak standing, just like I did when your foundation used to send me to VA clinics to advocate for invisible wounds." He blinked, slow and controlled. "This isn't about the past." "You're damn right it's not," I said. "It's about the present and the fraud you're all complicit in." One of the board members, a woman in her 60s with pearl earrings and a too-tight smile, leaned forward. "We'd prefer if this remained civil." "Civil," I laughed. "Dry. You doctored my military record, funneled money into a false narrative, and used my dead friend's image as a marketing tool. But sure, let's be civil." Ethan finally spoke. "You think this helps you? Making a scene, we've got lawyers, NDAs, asset freezes ready if you keep pushing." "You had my medals erased," I said. Louder. "You called my discharge administrative when I was recovering from shrapnel trauma. You made me look like I faked service. You turned me into a ghost and crowned yourself hero." I tossed a folder onto the table. It slid down like a playing card. The edge of the flash drive stuck out from inside. Copies of everything, metadata logs, emails between your PR team and the DoD contractor who replaced my file, and bonus whistleblower statements from 2 former employees. Frank remained motionless, but his jaw clicked. Just once. A tiny tick I remembered from childhood. That's when I knew he was nervous. Another man on the board, a hedge fund shark with veneers too bright for the room, cleared his throat. What exactly do you want? Mr. Whitaker, money. An apology. I leaned forward.
No, I want 3 things. In writing. And I want them today. Which are?
1, a full public correction of my record, and a formal statement recognizing Travis Lang's actual death report. Not the sanitized version you published. 2, a retraction of every ad, campaign, or scholarship using Ethan's fabricated background, plus full disclosure to donors. And 3, Frank asked, voice flat. Step down, I said. All of you. The room went still.
Even the HVAC system sounded like it stopped.
One of the lawyers finally spoke. Calm, clipped, expensive. You have no legal ground for that demand. I pulled out my phone, tapped a button, set it on the table. A voice began to play recorded. Crisp. Ethan's voice. From the gala. From the prep call. She'll be a footnote. Tops. PR will scrub anything we missed. Once she's discredited, no one will care what the original records say. Silence.
You recorded me, Ethan choked.
No, your tech team did. Maybe next time don't host strategy meetings on live stream backup servers.
I looked at Frank. He was staring at the dog tag in my hand now. I hadn't realized I'd pulled it out. I held it up. This belonged to Travis. He trusted me to carry it, just like he trusted me to lead when you all wouldn't even look at me. My voice cracked, just slightly. You erased me from family history, from military records, from legacy, but you can't erase this. I pressed the tag flat on the table. This is what legacy looks like. It's blood, sacrifice, truth. Not a foundation gala with ribbon-cutting speeches and fake medals. Frank finally stood. His eyes, usually so calculated, were clouded now. This will destroy the family name. Then maybe the name should burn, I said, and something honest can rise from it. I left the boardroom with the tag still in my hand, and when I stepped into the elevator, Grace was waiting there. Yes, Grace. She gave me a single nod, then handed me a manila envelope. Backup copies. 3. 1's going to the press, 1 to a vet-led nonprofit, 1 to the Secretary of Defense's office. I raised an eyebrow. You didn't trust I'd win in there. She shrugged. Always have a backup plan. You taught me that. Back on the street, I stood outside the Whitaker building and watched as the sun caught the name engraved in brass above the entrance. Whitaker Group HQ. I traced the letters in my mind, then turned away. They thought legacy was something you inherit. Turns out it's something you earn. And I wasn't done earning. Next. The backlash hits. Ethan fights back, and someone close to me turns out to be feeding him intel. 3 days after the boardroom showdown, my face was on every major news outlet. Not because I wanted fame, but because truth, once cracked open, leaks faster than any lie can plug it. CNN ran a headline. Decorated vet erased by own family whistleblower exposes elite PR scheme. And on Fox, fake hero Whitaker Group scandal unravels. Every interview I turned down made the story grow louder. Every photo they uncovered from Fallujah, from Kabul, from a medic tent where I held a dying translator's hand only fed the hunger. People didn't just want facts now. They wanted justice. But justice rarely comes clean or safe. I knew Ethan wouldn't go down without swinging. The first threat came wrapped in fake concern. An envelope, delivered to my motel room, postmarked with no return address. Inside, a glossy dossier with screenshots of personal emails, old credit card statements, and a note typed in all caps. We can ruin you too. Walk away. I held the note over the sink, watched it burn, black and bitter. Let them try. But then Grace went silent. No texts, no signal, no ghost emoji she always used after secure drops. That was my first real worry. The second, someone broke into my old army locker. Not the one in my garage, the one in the Memorial Museum basement, where they kept old gear for exhibits. They didn't steal anything. They rearranged it. The flag Travis was buried with folded wrong. My field boots laces swapped, one inside the other. A silent message. We're in your past now, too. It felt like invasion, like they were crawling into my memory, brick by brick. I moved motels every 36 hours, used prepaid phones, switched VPNs like socks. But somehow, they still stayed a step ahead. And then came the leak. Not mine, theirs. Suddenly, major outlets began reporting that I'd falsified portions of my record, that I'd been investigated for misconduct overseas, that classified documents showed I'd been removed from a field post after a poor decision under fire. It was bull, but they knew one truth: a planted doubt takes longer to scrub than a planted lie. I called Linda. I hadn't planned to hell. I didn't trust her fully, but I needed someone on the inside again. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was quiet. They're panicking. Anna, lawyers are shredding files. The PR team is drafting apology templates with selective regret phrasing. They think if they sacrifice Ethan, they'll save the rest. Ethan won't go quietly, I said. He's already staging a counter-narrative. I saw scripts for a docuseries. He's calling it The Real War at Home. He wants to spin this like he's a misunderstood patriot. I almost laughed. Let me guess, produced by the Whitaker Group and backed by a veteran PAC that this is actually owned by a shell company Frank created in 2011. Of course. Legacy Laundering 101. That night, I drove 3 hours to meet an old contact, Maya, a forensic analyst I served with back in '08. She owed me a favor after I covered for her during a base security breach in Turkey. She handed me a flash drive without a word. Inside, a map of every internal server Ethan's PR team had used to store and manipulate veteran identities. Names, photos, stolen stories packaged for marketing. But what made my stomach twist? One name kept repeating in metadata: Grace Parker. Timestamps, upload logs, folder permissions. Grace's credentials were tied to at least 14 fake veteran bios, including mine. I refused to believe it. I rechecked everything. But the audit didn't lie. She'd used a burner IP address. She tried to mask it, route through Argentina. But Maya found the key error: her encryption timestamp matched a digital thumbprint from Travis's own encrypted memorial file. Only Grace had access to that. The woman who saved my records was also the one feeding Ethan's machine. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I played every memory back, every smile Grace gave, every warning, every truth that now felt curated. Had she come to the gala to help me or to gauge how far I'd go? Was the dog tag really Travis's, or just a tool? The next day, I confronted her. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I just showed her the audit trail and watched her face. Grace sat on the bench outside a VFW hall in rural Virginia, the wind flipping her hair like pages of a book no one wanted to finish. She didn't deny it. Not at first. I thought if I stayed close, I could steer you away from revenge, she said. You mean the truth? No, she snapped. Revenge. The kind that destroys you while you're trying to win. She took a long breath. They paid me. Yes. But I also saved your file. I saved Travis's name. Because someone had to. You were gone. Silent. I did what I could. You did it for a check, I said. Don't dress it up. She looked at me then, and for the first time, her voice cracked. They told me you died. Silence. Back then, after the base explosion, I tried to reach you, but your comms were dead. When they offered me the position, I thought, hell, maybe if I could control some part of the lie, I could keep the worst parts from spreading. So you chose containment over courage. I chose survival, she whispered. I left without another word. Back at the motel, I tossed the dog tag on the table. It spun once, metallic and bitter. I didn't know what to believe anymore, but I knew what came next. Expose Ethan. It wasn't enough. Now, I had to dismantle the whole operation. Next, I take the fight public, live, with everything on the line. But the final move comes from someone I never saw coming. The studio lights were blinding, but I felt oddly calm. The live broadcast was minutes away. Every camera lens was pointed at me, every eye waiting to see if I'd crumble or conquer. The stakes, everything. The faded dog tag hung around my neck, a cold weight against my chest, a reminder of Travis of Truth. The host introduced me as the whistleblower challenging the mighty Whitaker legacy. I smiled, but inside, my heart thundered like artillery fire. Anna, how do you respond to accusations that you've fabricated parts of your military record? The host asked, eyes sharp. I took a breath, letting the room settle into silence. I don't fabricate history. I lived it, and I have the documents to prove it. I clicked a remote. The giant screen behind me flickered to life. Photos of me in uniform, scanned military orders, emails, and the ledger showing millions paid to Ethan for a fake story. This, I said, is the real Whitaker legacy. Gasps echoed through the studio. Meanwhile, back in the shadows, Ethan's world began to crack. His carefully crafted docuseries was postponed indefinitely. Sponsors pulled out. Donors called for transparency. But the true blow came when the Department of Defense announced an official audit of Whitaker Group's veteran contracts. The empire was crumbling. But the battle wasn't just public, it was personal. I received an anonymous package. Inside, a photo of my mother, smiling, holding a letter addressed to me never sent. A final plea she'd written years ago, begging for peace. Tears blurred my vision as I read her words. Anna, I was afraid of what loyalty to you would cost me. But know this, no matter what they say, you are my daughter, you are remembered, and you are loved. The letter was my last connection to the family I thought I lost. Then came the real shock. Grace appeared on my doorstep, unannounced. Her eyes were heavy with regret. I lied, she whispered, not to betray you, but to protect you. She pulled out a USB, trembling.
There's one more file, one they don't want anyone to see.
I plugged it in. A video. Security footage from the gala night showing Frank and several board members in a heated discussion about silencing me before I could go public.
Their words cold, calculated.
We can't let her destroy us. Find a way. Now. Grace looked up, eyes desperate. They're willing to go to any lengths. Suddenly, sirens blared outside. They've found us. We rushed to hide the USB. As we peeked through the curtains, black SUVs screeched to a halt. Men in suits poured out, badges flashing. My heart pounded, every instinct screaming fight or flight. But this time, I wasn't alone. Grace took my hand. Ready. I nodded.
The doors burst open. Anna Whitaker, you're coming with us.
But as the agents moved in, my phone rang. A familiar voice, calm, authoritative.
This is the Inspector General. We have a warrant. Stand down.
The agents hesitated. Your evidence triggered a federal investigation. You're under protection. Breathing hard, I realized this was no longer just a battle for legacy. It was a war for truth and for my life. Next, the fallout shakes the foundation. But the real victory comes when I find peace inside myself. The morning sun spilled through the window, casting long shadows across the room where I finally felt like myself again. It wasn't the fancy penthouse overlooking the city, or the headlines that had finally started to shift. It was the quiet, the slow, steady beat of a heart that had been broken, but wasn't broken anymore. Weeks after the federal investigation launched, the Whitaker Group faced lawsuits, resignations, and investigations that stretched into the highest levels of the Department of Defense. Ethan's name faded from the spotlight. Frank's empire started to crumble like old brick. But none of that mattered as much as what was healing inside me. I visited the Windham Hill Community Learning Center, the library I'd helped fund years ago. The plaque above the door was replaced again. This time, it bore the name I deserved, Anna Whitaker Community Learning Center. I touched the cold bronze letters like a benediction. Inside, Linda was waiting. She smiled when she saw me. "It's about time," she said softly. We walked through the rows of shelves, past children curled up with books about heroes, not the ones crafted by marketing, but the ones made of flesh and courage. That day, I held the dog tag Travis had given me. It was weathered, worn, and a little heavier with meaning. I pressed it to my lips. "This is our legacy," I whispered. Not the names on plaques or the speeches at galas, but the blood, the sacrifice, and the truth we carry with us. The battle wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about reclaiming history for everyone who had been silenced. For the women told to stay quiet. For the veterans whose stories were edited or erased. For the families who suffered in shadows while others took credit. I thought about my mother's letter, the words she never sent but finally shared. About forgiveness, love, and the hope that sometimes family means more than blood. I reached for my phone and called her. When she answered, her voice cracked. "Anna." I held back tears. "I'm home," I said. As I hung up, I realized this was only the beginning. Legacy isn't a trophy, it's a responsibility. And I was ready to carry it for Travis, for my family, and for every forgotten soldier out there. If you've ever felt erased, silenced, or forgotten, know this. Your story matters. Your truth matters. And no one can take that away from you unless you let them. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you believe in standing up for what's right, hit that like button, share your story in the comments, and subscribe to keep the conversation alive. Because justice isn't just for the powerful, it's for all of us. Remember the dog tag. Remember the truth. And above all, remember who you are. This isn't just my story. It's our legacy. Story 2. I was 36 years old the day my father called me it. Not Amelia, not Captain Hayes, not even daughter, just it. I hadn't been back to Newport in 6 years. The sea air still carried that same salty bite, but everything else felt foreign, colder, like the town itself had sided with them. The drive up from Virginia had been quiet. No music, no calls, just the steady hum of tires and the sound of my own heartbeat. I had told myself this wasn't a mistake, that maybe, just maybe, I could stand in the same room as them and not come apart. I pulled up to the Ida Lewis Yacht Club a full hour early, the kind of place with whitewashed columns, flagstone patios, and old money charm. I had once dreamed of getting married there, years ago, before everything fell apart. I wore my navy dress whites, pressed, immaculate, every ribbon earned, and I was proud of surviving what they did to me, proud of crawling back from nothing. I stepped out of the car, heels clicking on gravel, the sea wind tugging gently at my hat. The sun was just beginning to sink, casting that golden glow across the water, the kind they put on postcards. Then I saw him, the security guard, thick neck, radio in hand. His eyes narrowed as he spotted the insignia on my chest. Then the invitation in my hand. His brow furrowed. His radio clicked on.
Admiral Hayes, sir, the subject has arrived.
Subject. The word hit me like a slap. A voice crackled back. Sharp and cold. My father's. Do not let it take one step past that gate. It. My lungs clenched. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. Not from shame, but from something sharper. Older. Rage, maybe. Grief, definitely. I handed the invitation to the guard anyway. He didn't take it. That's when I saw it, what had been scrawled across the cardstock in red ink. Stay away! Disgrace. Handwritten. Olivia's handwriting. My little sister. I taught her how to write those cursive loops when she was 6. I held her hand as she traced her name for the first time. And now those same loops, carved through me like a knife. I looked through the black iron gates. There she was. Olivia, glowing in her Vera Wang dress. The kind you only wear once when you're sure everything is perfect. My mother stood next to her, adjusting her veil, smiling like nothing in the world could touch them. My father stood with a glass of bourbon in hand, laughing with a senator. And then I saw him. Maxwell Thorne. The man who ruined my life, who framed me, who handed me over to a dishonorable discharge like it was a wedding favor. And now he was standing beside my sister, arm around her waist, whispering something into her ear that made her laugh. He saw me. His expression didn't change. That same polished, smug grin. But his eyes glittered with quiet satisfaction. And then, slowly, he lifted his glass and toasted me. My breath caught. The edges of the world seemed to sharpen. I turned away. The last time I had stood near this place, I wore bruises no one could see, shame so thick it clung to my bones. I had been the Navy's cautionary tale, my own family's disgrace, a ghost. But not today. Today, I came back in uniform. And though they wouldn't let me through the gate, they couldn't stop what was coming. I started walking, past the row of manicured hedges, past the plaques commemorating naval heroes, toward the old oak tree by the shoreline, the one my father used to call ours. This tree is the Hayes legacy. He once told me, strong, rooted, unbreakable. I remembered tracing my initials into its bark when I was 10, right next to his. A childish gesture of loyalty, of belonging. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, flat pin. My officer's insignia. Silver, clean, earned. I placed it at the base of the tree. No note, no grand gesture, just a quiet truth. I was here. I'm still standing. And I remember everything. I turned back toward the parking lot, my steps slow, steady. As I passed the club again, a burst of laughter spilled from the reception tent. The sound stung. That was supposed to be my seat once. That was supposed to be my name on the card. Instead, I was the ghost outside the gate, until I wasn't. I had been erased. Now I was rewriting the ending. I reached my car, opened the door, then paused. A voice, low, hesitant. Captain Hayes. I turned. It was Paul, Olivia's old piano teacher's husband. He was holding a small velvet box in his hand, shaking slightly. I thought, you should have this. Your grandfather gave it to your father the day he got promoted. Your father meant to throw it out. Inside was a tarnished Navy coin, etched with our family motto, honor above all. I took it. Paul looked over his shoulder. He never deserved it anyway. And then he left. I stood there for a moment, turning the coin in my fingers. It was warm from his hand, heavy in all the ways that mattered. The sun dipped behind the horizon. My fingers closed around the coin. They called me a traitor. But the truth, the real betrayal hadn't happened on the battlefield. It happened at the dinner table. And tomorrow, I start taking it back. ChatGPT and I used to think betrayal came with warning signs, shouts, slammed doors, maybe a shiver down your spine. But real betrayal, it comes dressed in linen napkins and wine glasses. It laughs politely and calls you sweetheart. 6 years ago, just weeks before my world caved in, I had come home from a 3-month covert assignment in the Pacific. My uniform still smelled faintly of sea salt and diesel fuel. I was 30 pounds lighter, hair matted under my cap, and my body had forgotten what sleep felt like. But I was proud. We had pulled intel that would redefine underwater reconnaissance details I couldn't share, but I hoped, my family might understand what that meant. I walked into the Hayes family dining room, still half in uniform. It was my father's 60th birthday. The room sparkled, crystal, silverware, the family crest embroidered on napkins. It was a shrine to tradition, to legacy, his legacy. I stepped through the threshold, expecting a smile, a nod, a single moment of recognition. Instead, my mother looked up from her wine glass and frowned. Your posture, Amelia, and your face. What happened to your skin? Is that from the sun? I blinked. I just got off a plane. She leaned closer, her tone quiet but sharp. Couldn't you have cleaned up before dinner? Your sister invited some very important guests. My eyes found Olivia. Her dress was tailored ivory, and her hair was curled to perfection. She gave me that same tight smile she always used when I beat her at anything. You look intense, she offered, like you've been through something. I didn't know whether it was concern or criticism, but I still tried. I sat at the end of the table, next to the fireplace. A roast was being carved, wine poured into tall glasses, and in the background, soft classical music hummed like a lullaby for the rich and disconnected. Dad, I said, we found something out there. I can't say much, but it's going to reshape our anti-submarine strategy. I think it could save lives. He didn't even look up. Amelia, please, you're ruining the flavor of the lobster. The silence that followed was louder than anything I'd heard in the field. He turned to Olivia, beaming. Tell us about that charity gala. Sweetheart, your photo was in the Tribune. And just like that, I was there. I remember lying awake that night in the guest bedroom, if you could call it that. It used to be mine, but they'd repainted it beige and stripped the walls clean. Not a single photo of me, as if I had never lived there. I opened my phone and checked my inbox. No subject line, no sender name, just one message. They think it's you. Attached was a PDF classified, improperly forwarded, a screenshot of a memo, details about the leak from our mission. Every piece of evidence pointed to me. My IP address, my clearance code, even the timestamp matched a window where I'd been knocked out cold in a training exercise. It was a setup. I had 10 seconds of disbelief. Then the weight crashed in. The accusations, the court-martial, the Navy's sudden about-face. Within 3 weeks, I was out. No defense, no support. I stood in the courtroom, in full uniform, and listened as they stripped me of rank, of reputation, of everything. I looked over to the gallery. My mother was dabbing her eyes. Olivia clutched a tissue. But my father, he wouldn't meet my gaze. And later, in the parking lot, under gray skies and biting wind, he finally spoke. You spat on everything this family stands for. I asked him barely above a whisper, do you really believe I would do that? His eyes narrowed. What I believe doesn't matter. What the world sees does. I can't be associated with a disgrace. That was the last time he called me Amelia. I wandered for a while after that. New Mexico, Oregon, 1-bedroom rentals, 3-day jobs. There's a specific kind of silence that follows public disgrace. People know your name, but they pretend not to. They whisper just out of reach, I stopped wearing my service pins. I stopped introducing myself as captain. And every night, I asked the same question. Who would hate me enough to do this? The answer didn't come easily. Maxwell Thorne had been one of our civilian liaisons on that last mission. Charming, connected, unremarkably competent. But there had been rumors. Rumors I ignored. He had flirted with Olivia once, maybe more. I never paid it attention. I should have. One night, at a tiny diner in coastal Oregon, I got another message. No sender, just a file, metadata logs. Proof. Maxwell had cloned my clearance. He had sent the leak through a VPN routed through an old Navy database. The trail was clear if someone knew where to look. I leaned back in the vinyl booth, hands shaking around a chipped mug of coffee. I wasn't angry. I was empty. Then I felt it a shift, like a pilot flicking off autopilot midair. I opened a new folder on my laptop, labeled it Thorne Counteroffensive, and I started to collect. 6 months later, I received a plain envelope. Inside was a notice from the Department of Defense. My case had been reopened, quietly. Someone inside had reviewed the logs I'd submitted anonymously. They had questions. I was flown back east under a new temporary identity. I met with an internal review panel, handed over every byte of data I had. And when the ruling came, reinstated, full honors, Captain Amelia Hayes. No parade! No cameras. Just a signature, a seal, and a truth I could finally breathe again. But I didn't go back home. I bought a storage unit outside D.C. and filled it with evidence. Thorne's contracts, his fake charities, the manipulation of media, the bribes. A year passed, then another, until one day. The headline hit my newsfeed. Maxwell Thorne to marry Admiral Hayes's daughter in lavish Newport ceremony. And just like that, everything aligned. I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a small leather case. Inside my dress uniform, cleaned, pressed. Not for a mission, not for a ceremony, but for the reckoning. They thought I was gone. They thought they had written the final chapter. They forgot I knew how to write my own ChatGPT, didn't I? The wedding was 3 weeks away when I mailed the RSVP. White envelope, clean cursive. Captain Amelia Hayes will attend. I knew they wouldn't believe it. That's why I sent it by certified mail. Required a signature. Tracked it all the way to the family mailbox in Newport. 10 days later, I got a voicemail. Not from my father, not Olivia. From the event coordinator. Hi, Miss Hayes. This is Marla from Tool and Vine Events. We just wanted to confirm that, due to guest list adjustments, your RSVP has been withdrawn. If you have questions, please contact Admiral Hayes' office. Withdrawn. I didn't call back. They wanted me erased again, politely, this time, with satin gloves and an RSVP code. But the truth I didn't expect to be welcomed. I didn't need permission. I wasn't going to show up for them. I was going to show up for me. 3 days before the wedding, I paid a quiet visit to a man named Calvin Rhodes, former Navy, now an investigative journalist for a veteran-focused outlet. I handed him a file, heavy and dense. Maxwell Thorne, I said, you want a Pulitzer start here. Calvin flipped through the page's email chains, donor records, military procurement reports. His face tightened. Holy hell, Captain! You've been sitting on this? I nodded.
For years, I wanted it airtight. You'll run it.
He didn't hesitate. The day of the wedding, I left him my number, but I knew he wouldn't need it. The file spoke for itself. The night before the wedding, I checked into a small inn down the road from the yacht club. My room overlooked the ocean. Salt breeze came in through the cracked window. I didn't sleep. I pressed my uniform for the 4th time, repolished my shoes, checked the weight of the coin Paul had returned to me. Honor above all. They said revenge ages the soul, but in that moment, I felt younger than I had in years, because it wasn't revenge. It was revelation. The morning of, I stood in front of the mirror in full dress whites. My reflection stared back with a clarity I hadn't seen since I was discharged. My father's coin in my left breast pocket, my reinstatement letter folded into my right, a flash drive tucked beneath my ID tag just in case the media needed proof beyond paper. I drove to the venue with no music, just the hum of the tires and the storm settling in my chest. As I pulled into the parking lot, staff were rushing around in a blur of pastels and clipped headsets. I walked slowly toward the entrance, not expecting to be let in. I wasn't. The same thick-necked security guy spotted me from yards away. He adjusted his earpiece and froze. Then he stepped forward. "Ma'am, I was told you're not on the list." I handed him the invitation anyway. His eyes flicked across it, then paused. On my name. On the rank. He looked up. "Captain Hayes?" I saw at the flicker. Confusion. Recognition. I said nothing. He spoke into his mic. Admiral. We've got a situation. She's here." My father's voice, filtered and flat. "Don't let her in." That was the second time he tried to lock me out. The first was metaphorical. This one felt like war. I nodded once, calm. My heels clicked as I turned and walked away. I didn't need the room. I didn't need the ceremony. What came next didn't need an audience because I'd already invited the only 3 people who mattered. At exactly 2:15 p.m., 3 separate packages were delivered. One to Calvin Rhodes, who uploaded the exposé within minutes. One to the Office of Naval Oversight. And one to a rival defense firm Thorne had tried to tank through a phony bribery scandal. Each contained the same thing, a polished, time-stamped timeline of corruption, stolen clearances, misappropriated funds, and one name stamped over every document. Maxwell Thorne. Back at the club, the wedding was in full swing. The ocean sparkled, champagne flowed, Olivia was glowing. Maxwell gave his toast smooth, confident. To the Hayes family, a legacy of honor. I watched from a bench just outside the hedge line. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read his mouth. I could also see his phone buzz mid-toast. He checked it, once, twice. The color drained from his face. He paused. Faked a smile. Then excused himself. 10 minutes later, the buzz reached Olivia. Her bridesmaids clustered, whispering. 20 more. And 2 men in suits not groomsmen showed up at the edge of the venue. They weren't here to dance. By the time the cake was cut, Maxwell was gone. By sundown, half the guests had left. By midnight, the story had hit every major military blog on the East Coast. But I didn't celebrate. I sat in my car, parked beneath the same tree I once carved my initials into. I took out the coin again. Honor above all. What a joke. Then again, maybe that's what this was all about. Not revenge, not restoration, just a quiet reminder of who I had been and who I still was. And that tree, the one my father once said, symbolized the unbreakable Hayes line. Before I left, I pressed the coin into the bark. Let it rest there. No note, no explanation. Just steel against wood. Something you can't ignore, but can never take back. And the next morning, I woke up to a new message. No sender. No text. Just a video file. 30 seconds long. It was my father, staring into a camera, voice shaking. "What have you done, ChatGPT?" And I watched the video 5 times before I blinked. My father, Admiral Charles Hayes, wasn't wearing his uniform. Just a white undershirt, creased slacks, and a face that looked like it had aged 10 years overnight. He stared into the camera like it might explode, or confess. His hands gripped the edge of the desk so tightly the wood creaked. "What have you done?" he asked. There was no anger in his voice, only fear. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel smaller under his gaze. I felt even, like maybe, finally. The scales had found their balance. But that wasn't the end of the video. He leaned closer, voice lower. "Do you know what you've unleashed? You think this is just about Thorn. You think you're the only one with a legacy to protect." A pause. "They'll come after all of us now, including you." He cut the video there. I stared at the frozen frame, his face mid-breath, and realized something chilling. He wasn't afraid because I exposed the truth. He was afraid because the truth might spread. I didn't respond. Instead, I called the one person who had never asked anything from me in return. Paul, Carol's husband, Olivia's old piano teacher's partner. The quiet observer at the back of every family event, the man everyone forgot was even there. He picked up on the first ring. "You all right?" he asked, his voice lined with caution. "I need a favor," I said. "You remember that USB I left you with the wedding footage?" "Yeah." "Was there audio near the bar around the time of the toast?" He paused.
Actually, yes. Background mic was live. Why?
"Check for a conversation between Maxwell and my father, just after his toast." Another pause, longer this time. "You think your dad knew?" "I think he knew," I said, "and worse, I think he helped cover it." Later that night, Paul sent a file. The audio was scratchy, but clear enough to pick out the voices. "Maxwell, it's done. Everything's buried. Your daughter can't hurt me." My father, "Just make sure she doesn't come back. This family won't survive another scandal." Maxwell, "I promised Olivia I'd protect the name, even from her own blood." Silence. Then glasses clinking. My hands shook. They hadn't just watched me fall, they'd cheered it on, sealed it with a toast, turned bloodlines into bargaining chips. And I knew what came next. I had exposed Thorn, but the rot ran deeper, through my family, through the chain of command that backed my father's rapid rise. My reinstatement had cracked the dam, and the flood was coming. The next morning, Calvin Rhodes, the journalist, called me back. "Your father's office issued a statement. He's retiring, citing health." "Coward," I muttered. "It gets worse," Calvin continued. "The Navy's trying to distance from the whole mess. They've scrubbed your reinstatement from public records. No press, no medals, no formal apology. They're burying me again." "Not if we don't let them," he said. That afternoon, I submitted a formal appeal. Public. I wrote a letter to the House Armed Services Committee. I attached my reinstatement letter, the classified logs, the wedding audio. Then I sent it to every major military and political reporter in the Northeast. This time, I wasn't waiting quietly behind a hedge. This time, I kicked the damn door down. Olivia sent a text 2 hours later. "Why are you doing this? You already ruined everything." I stared at her message, at the tiny profile photo, her and Maxwell, frozen mid-laugh under a palm tree in Cabo. And I thought about the night she found out I was being discharged, the way she cried into my mother's arms, how her shoulders shook like it broke her. But now I saw it clearly. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying for the loss of convenience, for the shame of a sister who couldn't be paraded at fundraisers. She'd married my betrayer and toasted over my name. I didn't reply. The next day, a subpoena landed at Maxwell's office. Congress wanted a word. His consulting firm's shares plummeted. His clients dropped him. The company website vanished overnight. A clip from his deposition leaked 3 days later. In it, He sat stiff in a navy blue suit, sweat dotting his forehead. When asked about the original intel leak, he hesitated. I was acting under pressure from higher-ups. I didn't know Captain Hayes would take the fall. He flinched at his own words. It wasn't supposed to destroy her. Too late? But justice isn't neat. It doesn't come with music swelling in the background or courtroom clapping. It comes in fragments, in small wins that don't erase the scars. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again, uniform still sharp, shoulders squared. But I didn't recognize the woman anymore. Not fully. She wasn't just Captain Hayes. She wasn't just the daughter of an admiral. She was something else now. A woman rebuilt from the rubble her own family threw at her. A woman who stopped waiting to be let in and built her own damn house. Then, just before midnight, I got a voicemail from a blocked number. It was Olivia. Her voice was brittle, careful. Amelia, I think you need to know. Dad's lawyer called. There's a sealed envelope, something he wrote after your reinstatement. It's in the safe at the Newport house. She paused. He told the lawyer it was for you. Only you. But Mom, she doesn't want you near the house. Another pause. If you want it, you'll have to go alone. And you'll have to be quick. My heart pounded. My mind raced. Whatever was in that envelope might be the final piece. Might be the confession. Might be the apology I'd stopped hoping for. Or it might be something worse. ChatGPT'd and I waited until midnight. The Hayes estate sat at the edge of Newport, hidden behind manicured hedges and iron gates, so old they still bore gas lamp holders. The kind of house that looked like it had secrets baked into the walls. Like its bricks were laid with hush money and ambition. I parked 2 streets down and walked in the dark. No uniform tonight. Just black jeans, a hoodie, and gloves. I wasn't breaking in. I was reclaiming. The side gate still had the old latch. I had fixed it myself one summer in high school while my father barked orders from the porch. Still squeaked the same. The path through the garden was exactly as I remembered: hydrangeas on the left, stone angel by the rosemary bushes. I passed the kitchen window and paused. The light over the sink was still on. Inside, my mother sat at the table, alone, a half-full glass of red wine beside her. She was staring at nothing. A statue in silk. Her hands, always perfectly manicured, now trembled slightly as she lifted the glass. She didn't see me, or maybe she did and just didn't care. I slipped past the window and toward the back entrance. The door code hadn't changed. 1952, my father's birth year. Inside, the air smelled the same cedarwood polish, stale paper, and the faint trace of cigar smoke clinging to the rug like a ghost. I moved down the hall, floorboards creaking under carpet. The study door was ajar. I stepped in. Everything was untouched leather chairs, books aligned by color, framed awards lining the wall. The portrait above the fireplace of my father in full uniform, medals sharp on his chest. I walked to the safe behind the bookshelf. Combination 16 to 0432. The day he became admiral. It clicked open on the second try. Inside was a single black envelope, sealed with a wax insignia, our family crest. That damn oak tree again. I held it for a beat, weighing it in my palm. Part of me wanted to burn it without reading. Another part hoped. I broke the seal. Inside 3 things: a handwritten letter, a photograph, and a folded newspaper clipping. I read the letter first. Amelia, if you're reading this, then I have failed twice. Once as a father, again as a man who thought silence was strength. You were never meant to take the fall, but I stood by while others used you as a shield. I told myself it was for the family, for the uniform. But the truth is simpler and uglier. I was afraid. Afraid of losing the legacy. afraid of what they'd find if they dug too deep. You weren't the only one they could destroy. I signed off on Maxwell's clearance. I knew what he was. I just didn't want it to be true. And when the storm came, I let them blame you. I am sorry. Not enough. Not soon enough. But it is the truth. Charles. I didn't cry. I felt something shift. Not closure. Not rage. Just the truth, landing like a weight finally put down. Then I looked at the photo. It was me. At age 11, in my first cadet uniform, standing under the oak tree in our backyard, saluting, my father beside me, kneeling. He was smiling. Not the stiff, official smile for photos. A real one. I had forgotten that day even existed. The clipping was from a local paper, a tiny op-ed from a Navy widow, praising a female captain she'd never met, the one who saved my son's unit, who stood trial alone, who kept her mouth shut when silence was asked of her. She never named me, but she didn't have to. I sat on the study floor for a long time, letter on my lap. The only sound was the tick of the mantel clock and the wind hissing through the chimney. Then I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow. Deliberate. My mother. I tucked the letter into my jacket and stood. She appeared at the top of the staircase, barefoot, her silk robe flowing like she was still playing First Lady of the Navy. You shouldn't be here, she said. Her voice wasn't sharp, just tired. I didn't come to fight. Then why break in? I held up the envelope. I came for the truth, and I got it. She looked at me for a long time, like I was some antique she didn't remember buying. He did love you, you know? I blinked. Only when it was convenient. No, he loved you in the only way he knew how, conditioned, silent, like all the men before him. I didn't reply. You ruined everything, she added, not angry, just stating a fact. The name. The image, the legacy. No, I said quietly. I just stopped pretending we were perfect. We stood there, locked in quiet standoff. Then I turned and walked past her. Down the stairs. Out the door. Into the night air that no longer felt heavy. The next morning, Paul texted me. You might want to see this. A clip. Maxwell in handcuffs. Perp walk, cameras flashing, reporters shouting his name like it was a curse. But the real shock, he wasn't the only one. 2 more men followed. And at the end, Admiral Charles Hayes, not in cuffs, but standing next to a federal agent, cooperating, testifying. I stared at the screen, heart racing. He was doing the one thing I never thought he would. He was telling the truth. In front of the whole damn world. And maybe this story wasn't about erasing the name. Maybe it was about finally making it mean something. Then, as I scrolled down the article, something else caught my eye. A subpoena. Issued that morning. To me, Captain Amelia Hayes, requested to testify before the U.S. House Armed Services Committee. The final reckoning wasn't over. They wanted me on the record. And I had one last story to tell. The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Not just the temperature, but the atmosphere's sterile lights, the steady murmur of cameras, the shuffle of papers. I sat at the witness table, heart pounding like a drumline in a parade. Every eye was on me, reporters, officials, even my father. He wasn't the proud man I'd once known. He looked smaller, worn, like the weight of years and scandal had crushed his frame. I gripped the edge of the table, steadying my hands. The committee chair began. Captain Hayes, thank you for your testimony. Please tell us what you discovered about the leak and your role in uncovering the truth. I took a breath. I was falsely accused of leaking classified information during my deployment. The actual source was Mr. Maxwell Thorne,
a civilian contractor who manipulated military channels for personal gain.
Every word echoed, the truth laid bare. A hand raised. Captain, your family has expressed concerns about your involvement in this matter. Did you feel betrayed by those closest to you? The question cut deeper than I expected. I paused, thinking of my father's cold dismissal, my mother's distant tears, Olivia's silent smiles. Yes, but betrayal doesn't define me. Surviving it does. The room shifted.
Whispers, nods, pens scratching.
I told them about the letter, my father's confession, and the audio recording that exposed Maxwell's and Charles's collusion. I watched as expressions flickered shock, regret, disbelief. I wasn't just telling my story, I was rewriting history. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy was relentless. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. But I kept my focus. I had come here not for revenge, but for justice. I stood in the sunlight, the wind catching my jacket. A reporter shouted, "Captain Hayes, do you think your family will ever forgive you?" I looked toward the old oak tree behind the building, the one where I left my officer's pin. I smiled faintly. Forgiveness is complicated, but truth is timeless. Weeks later, the Navy issued a formal apology. Not public fanfare, but a letter, a quiet acknowledgement of wrong. My reinstatement became official, my records corrected. But more than that, a foundation was established in my name to support women in the military facing discrimination. The irony wasn't lost on me. And my father, he resigned quietly. No speeches, no interviews, just a statement. I accept responsibility for my actions and will cooperate fully with ongoing investigations.
I heard rumors he moved away. To Florida, maybe?
At home, I sat alone by the window, the weight of years pressing down. I held the coin Paul had given me, the one stamped with honor above all. I turned it over and over, feeling its cold metal against my skin. And then I realized I had fought for honor, not just for a uniform or a name, but for the person I refused to let be erased. I was free. But freedom is a fragile thing. One evening, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered. A cold voice whispered, "You think this is over? The real fight has just begun." And then the line went dead. I stared at the screen. My pulse quickened. This was no longer just about my family. It was bigger and darker. Because sometimes, the truth you fight for is the very thing that puts you in the crosshairs. I remember the moment I realized this wasn't just a story about revenge. It was about reclamation. Sitting alone in my small coastal apartment, the ocean breeze slipping through the cracked window. I held the coin Paul had given me, the one stamped with honor above all. For years, that phrase felt like an unreachable ideal, a weight I could never carry. But now, it felt like a promise I had finally kept. I had been called a traitor, erased by the very family who should have been my refuge. But I was still here, standing, stronger, more myself than I ever was in their shadow. The fight wasn't clean. It wasn't fair. There were no trophies, no parades, only the slow, steady burn of truth piercing the lies. When I walked into that courtroom, I wasn't just telling my story, I was rewriting the narrative for every woman who had been silenced, every soldier discarded, every person told they didn't belong. My father's resignation, Maxwell's indictment, the Navy's apology, they were milestones. Yes, but they weren't the finish line. Family is complicated. The people who love you can also be the ones who hurt you the most. Olivia's message still lingers. Why do you have to ruin everything? Her pain wasn't about justice. It was about fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of facing the cracks in a perfect image. I forgave her long ago. Not because she deserved it, but because I needed to set myself free. I learned that honor isn't about titles or medals. It's about integrity. About standing tall when everyone else wants to push you down. About refusing to let their version of your story become your own. So what now? I don't have all the answers, but I know this. Justice isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about speaking the truth, even if your voice trembles. About proving your worth silently, through every action. About reclaiming what was stolen not with fire, but with steady light. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever been erased, silenced, or told you don't belong, you are not alone. You are not the lies they told. You are the strength you've built. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Just your presence. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share your story. Tell me how have you reclaimed your truth. Because in the end, our stories are what connect us. And sometimes, the quietest voices echo the loudest.